Hi, everybody. This is Mike Oppenheim, and you are listening to Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. This week, our guest is Jonathon Aslay. He's a midlife dating coach with an expanded philosophy of what it truly means to love. That's a great reason to have him on the podcast, but the part that really affected us and what we're going to get into today is that he lost his 19-year-old son, Connor, in 2018, and his grief led him on a soul-searching inner journey where he became aware of an often overlooked dimension of the dating conversation. So I wanted to bring that up in the beginning of the interview before we meet Jonathon to let you know where this conversation is probably going to go. I think there's nothing more important for us than to listen to someone and their grief and their process and how they've turned their life into something positive with something so negative. So with no further delays, Jonathon, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be on, actually.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and I hope you understand my introduction, but I just want to start by saying that as a father of a son and two daughters, I mean, I just, I feel a feeling that I'm sure every parent understands when I hear about what happened, and I'm just so sorry, but also, I'm not sorry in that weird coffin talk way where the whole point of the show is to help people understand the philosophy of metaphysics and how it can better apply to their life. So with that said, before we start, how old are you? Where did you grow up? And in what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
Oh, good question. Well, I'm 62 years old. I grew up just a little south of Los Angeles in the beach cities of Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach, just south of LAX.
Oh, cool.
I guess I identify with it being a tail end baby boomer, only because my other son, jokingly, calls me a boomer. So, but I don't feel like a boomer, but I guess I connect with that.
Yeah, I would say 62 in 2024 is not really what I would associate with boomer. My parents are through and through baby boomers, and yeah, it's also just a weird stereotype. But we do ask that question because it helps people understand where you're at, and that was a great answer to let us know that you're just really you. And I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I'm familiar with where you described in Southern California.
Got it. Yeah.
But I am now in Arizona. So let's start with the dating stuff because I actually find it fascinating. I met my wife through online dating, which was utterly mind-blowing and unexpected. And I was 36, I think, when I met her, and I'm now 43. So do you do online dating or do you do traditional dating or do you do both?
Well, personally for myself, and I happen to be single, I do online dating predominantly, partially because I work from home. I mean, unless some female burglar, breaks down the door and says you're cute, I'm just not in enough environments. And I do make effort to put myself in environments where I can be around single, eligible people. But online dating now represents where I believe, statistically speaking, 65% of all new couples are connecting through an online medium. And that includes social media as well as the dating sites. Mm-hmm. And this is down substantially from, say, 30, 40 years ago, where church, school, work, family and friends were the predominant places where you met people. And then prior to that was the town or village you lived in predominantly. I mean, throughout for all of humanity, you mated within your tribe. Mm-hmm. We have shifted from that type of introductory phase into that. On one level, it's great that we have the internet because you can connect with people you wouldn't otherwise meet, but they also represent absolute strangers most of the time. And there's a different learning curve to get to know a person who's a stranger versus somebody who says, hey, this is my best friend's brother. I want to introduce you. I know he's a good guy. He comes from a good family, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And it's funny because so I was dating in my mid-30s extensively online because I had moved to Arizona with my first wife, and then we got a divorce and split up, and the separation seemed fine, but then the aftermath was not fine. So I found myself here in Arizona not knowing almost anyone, and so I was pretty much forced to online dating. But then I also, as I met people, got set up, and I actually found that setups, while they sound great and you go into it with like a different level of enthusiasm, they really didn't work in like a funny way to me. Like I found that repeatedly these people were just like, oh, we would be friends, but we don't have time for friends, and I didn't come here to meet a friend. So I'm just curious, is that like a common thing you hear, or do you think setups still work really well?
It's interesting as you're sharing this, Mike. I'm remembering a time where I had a female friend says, "Oh, I have a perfect girl for you," and and when I met this woman, and no disrespect, I'm like, I sent to my friend, I go, "What were you thinking?" And not because of maybe a physical attractiveness, but I said, "Your friend is a train wreck," and she goes, "Yeah, I know, but like so." I'm not really a fan of fix-ups per se. But I've had plenty of people reach out to me say, "Hey, check out my friend's, Facebook page." One of the things I like about social media is you can get a little peek into someone's life, if you do it from an intuitive perspective.
Hmm.
So I'm a big proponent of even connecting with people via social media once you connect, because again, we're as from a dating perspective, most humans are really not good at how to get to know another human being. We've often believed that chemistry equals relationship success. And while chemistry is radically important, shared values, shared vision, a lifestyles that can blend, and more importantly, emotional maturity are the factors to relationship success. And so, I overemphasize in my coaching practice the importance of personal development, self-help, and spiritual work.
Mm.
And I do want to talk about, death as well, because my journey to get to where I'm at included this experience of losing my son and what it meant to me to kind of ask myself, what happens when we die? Because it kind of, as a connect the dots backward, has helped me even be a better coach for those who are single looking for love.
Oh wow. Well, there's so much to unpack in that.
I know.
I think I'll start with like my three questions I have for you as an expert with midlife dating. And I don't
Yeah,
even need the word midlife in that. I mean, I don't mind that you put it in, but this would just be my question for nearly anyone
sure.
who's 21 and up, I would say. Um, so it's three different questions, and I'll ask them separately. Um, when is once you're dating someone, when is a good time to start introducing them to your friends? Because this is something that came up a lot with me. Like a girl I was dating was like, "You have to meet all my friends," and I was like, "This seems like a little early."
And I just want to touch upon something really quickly. The only
Mhm.
reason why I differentiate myself in midlife is one of the unique factors for people over 45
Mhm.
in the dating market pool is most often they're divorced. Whereas when someone's in their 20s and 30s, they're on the hunt for making babies and raising a family. That's the only reason why I differ. But my advice does encompass both. So
Cool.
when to introduce family and or friends, I think when you feel like this has some potential, I think it's important to integrate people into your life. If you feel like this has some potential,
Mhm.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily do it on a first, second, or third date, but I would say by the time two people are contemplating physical intimacy with another person, and they're doing so with the intent of maybe having some legs, then integrating, again, this is an individual choice, but I want to know what my family and friends think about a person I'm with. I want to experience them because this is part of the decision making process to kind of decide if you want to go all in with somebody.
Yeah, it's funny. You actually covered both sides of it for me, like on the way up in my 20s and 30s, and then also, after. So I'm 43 now, but I would definitely
Yeah.
classify the time I was dating my 30s as a post-divorce man. But the woman I met, fell in love with, and now have had two children with, and am very happily married to, she had never been divorced, and she was like, "Oh, that's a huge red flag." When we started dating, like I was up, I was working against that, and now, of course, she understands.
So the thing is, a red flag is not the same as a deal breaker. A red flag simply means ask more questions. So it's fair that that might have been a red flag for her. But had she made the mistake of a deal breaker, then she would have missed out on a great guy. So red flag means, okay, I want to find out what the heck happened because you could be a train wreck and she doesn't want to get involved with that, which is fair. But that's why red flag means ask questions. Deal breaker is a deal breaker.
So I don't normally say this, but that was the most original, interesting, and not dating coach answer I've heard. I loved that answer. I cannot possibly tell you how much that really is something I wish the larger internet culture at a whole, like that is much younger than me, would just kind of understand. Is like when you get a funny feeling, it doesn't mean immediately slam the gate and say no. It just means keep that noted. I loved that answer. Thank you. Yeah. And yeah, and a lot of red flags, they do come true, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't be with a person. That's a part of conflict in dating, I think. So great answer. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome.
Okay, my second question, and this is a little hard to talk about because I need to purposely be vague. It does not apply to my current wife, just to be clear, but it does apply to other people in my life from my past. If you're not physically attracted to someone, but you're very emotionally attracted and you're like intellectually attracted, should you still keep trying to date them? And at what point should you just give up? Want more interesting conversations? Head over to mikeyop.com and sign up for a premium subscription. You'll get bonus podcasts, essays, and other goodies. Plus, it's the #1 way to support the show. Just go to mikeyop.com, mikeyop.com, and click subscribe, and we'll send you a link. Thank you.
Oh my God, talk about irony. I just had this happen, but it was not me not chemistry for her. It was her not have chemistry with me. I recently connected with a woman online. We spent about a week chatting and we hit it off intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. We checked a lot of boxes. And unfortunately, when we met, she wasn't feeling it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, the rule of thumb would be that, you would give that a little bit of a chance. Now, we had distance involved, so it wasn't going to be some sort of, hey, let's hang out over a period of time where that could be build or grow. It was kind of a make or break type of circumstance. And I now look at it from a spiritual perspective. Even though she didn't have chemistry for me, I believe on a spiritual level, there's a bigger reason why there was resistance to move forward together.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, again, and because here's what happens. If you have to talk yourself into attraction, or if someone has to talk you into it being attracted to them, it will later on down the road have some sort of ramifications, I believe. And again, this spiritual perspective that I have was birthed after I went into a deep dive of studying death for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when my son passed away, so I look at these little markers when there's resistance for whatever reason. And sometimes we may just think it's chemistry when it could be something completely different, but that's what we associate with. And so now, the typical rule of thumb is, I would say, for men, we need chemistry. Otherwise, the equipment doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so that's a typical rule of thumb. I would say for women, they can fall in love between the ears versus between the groin.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think it's something worth examining because it might be a resistance going on within them that might have a bigger picture. So it's a toss-up question on what to do, to be honest with you.
No, I loved your answer. I love the way you answered it, and you're really just cut from a different cloth. I love the spiritual approach you're giving. I think because it's come up twice, it would be irresponsible to not just directly ask you about your son Connor and that experience. So
Sure.
Why don't we let you tell that however you feel? I know you've been on a lot of podcasts, so I'm sure you have a way of talking about it. So I just want to let you know that whatever you want to do is fine.
No, I appreciate that. And I recognize that, that especially as a parent, I know the minute that happened and within my circle of friends, I hate to say this, but I was the first to lose a child. And sadly, my best man in my wedding lost his youngest son a few years later. So I don't like to say like the first, but within my circle of friends, the grief that everyone felt, because especially as a parent, it hits you at a core level. For me and actually my ex-wife, when I was giving his eulogy, I remember stopping and looking at everybody at the church, and I said, we have a choice. We can grieve with suffering, or we can grieve with love. And I said that because I know he would not want me to suffer one moment in my life. Because and so as a way to honor him, I'm sad, there's pain, I think about him frequently, I get messages from him all the time. Oh my God, I can't begin to tell you how many messages I get from him. And I believe it's because the portal of love is open to connect with him. So this is just my experience. I can't speak for anyone else who's lost a child. I understand the pain, and some people sadly are still suffering in that pain. I wish them all the love. They're in my prayers. I wish I can give everyone a gigantic hug. What When he passed, though, it inspired me to really do a deeper dive into what it means to love, and particularly in the dating realm, because that's my genre, professionally.
Hmm.
And I went on to write a book called "What the Heck Is Self Love Anyway?" And there's elements of him in the book, but one of the things that happened that you might find interesting is several months before he passed away, I was in a study group. Doing the Course in Miracles, which is,
Oh yeah,
in this
cool.
particular case, I was already 1 year into 365 lessons because there's a lesson each day. And a month or about 6 to 8 weeks before he passed, we got into we are not a body, we got into death, what happens. Like I was immersed myself in this, and then he passed. And and as I was really exploring what this means to me, what happens after we die, I had done a psilocybin journey with a shaman. And I mean, I had an amazing visitation from my son. I had a whole new sense of awareness of what I believe happens when we pass away and the connectivity we have with loved ones when they pass away. And I've subsequently done 30 journeys since then. So I've become a bit of a psychonaut, partially because I wanted to overcome my fear of death, but also embrace it as a way to navigate life, because most every fear, when you get to the root cause of the fear, it's the fear of death. Like every fear boils down to, I believe, in my interpretation,
Hmm.
is at the core level, I'm going to die if this doesn't get solved.
Yeah.
Like I lost my job. I'm going to die. This happens. I'm going to die. So if I believe that once we can embrace life and what happens afterwards in a, I'm going to use the word positive sense, but in a less fearful sense, we can navigate all of our existence in a state of joy might not be the right word, but an equilibrium or an equanimity, if you will.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me, and I think it segues naturally into the only fixed question we have on the show, which is we always ask every guest, what do you think happens when you die? So I would be very curious to know, you've talked about, talking to Connor on the other side and getting messages from him is
Yeah,
actually what you
yeah.
said. You didn't say talking, so forgive me, that's me putting words in your mouth, but
No, if I didn't,
yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah. I'm trying to think. Well, we did have a conversation. The last time I checked in with him, I always, when I do a journey, I always check in what message do you have for me. And the last message was, "Dad, stop bugging me. I'm doing fine."
That's funny.
And that was 2 years ago. And I mean, he still comes and visits in a variety of different ways, but the talking has kind of cut back, if you will. So I have multiple thoughts on this. I actually explore this in a variety of different ways. So one, I believe we live on multiple planes of existence. So this experience, is one of many experiences the soul has. That's one perception I have. Another perception I have is we live in multiverses, and so each experience can be uniquely different from another experience on a multiverse level. But I have one perception that's my most favorite,
Cool.
and that is when we pass away, we sit, and I had this vision like as vivid as I'm talking to you right now. that we sit together with our soul tribe. And let's say there's 20 members in your soul tribe, and there may not be anyone that you know personally in your life right now, per se.
I like that.
Like, is that you're sitting with your soul tribe and you're at a fire pit, like you're at a campground in a big, gigantic roaring fire. And each person shares the story of their life. And if you lived 80 years, it takes 80 years to tell the story. So because time is an illusion, in this sphere, the way we perceive time. But if you lived 80 years, you tell every single grain, every single moment, and your soul tribe is just sitting there with absolute, wow, you did that? No way, you did that? Really? That was and there's no judgment for the stupid, ridiculous, crazy things we've all humans do. And the story is like captivating to hear that story of how you experience life. And you're sitting there, and sometimes you're waiting several lifetimes to get your turn to share with your soul tribe. That's one of my favorite perceptions of what happens from that perspective. And then then you come back and do it again in a different plane of existence. I also believe that this particular life experience is like Groundhog Day. If you lived 80 years, you get reborn and you do it again with another sense of maybe a little bit more sense of the previous go around.
Mm-hmm.
But that's another perception I have. And I love being able to play with all of these different modalities of what happens. And do I know it's true or not? It doesn't matter. What it does for me is give me comfort that everything is happening for me. And even and by the way, I can experience tremendous amount of fear in my life in a variety of different ways. I just come back to this inner knowing, or trust, I should say. Let me reframe that. Mm-hmm. A trust that even when I'm in my deepest fear, that everything is going to be okay.
Yeah, I definitely have learned that and relied on that. I think the first time I really felt that was when I dropped acid, took LSD in college.
Yeah.
And I just remember the overwhelming paranoia. And I was like, I just had this moment where I was like, well, you can either give into this and this is hell, or you can trust in the process and hope that it isn't unpleasant. And then it was not like the best time ever and I party, but it was, that worked, and I kept using that. And that's why I don't tell people they should or shouldn't, do psilocybin or LSD or any other drug, but I do cautiously recommend to people that it does build up a sense of resiliency with your own mind, that, most of the fear of psychedelics is the fear of your own mind not working the way you're used to it working. But I think what you just talked about is a lot of that. It's a lot of like the free play of thought and experiences can kind of take you into this, because I share most of your opinions and their opinions, and that's why I can share them, which is that this interdimensionality just seems almost obvious at this point. Like I sleep every night. That's another dimension, and I don't know who it is. It's like that person is never Mike, and he never like talks like me, and he's not me, but I feel like I'm him. So that to me is like the biggest hint of what might be going on. And I really appreciated your answers, all of them.
So I've only done LSD 3 times, but the last time, which was about 8 months ago, I had my most profound ego death, and that sense of reality was completely gone. And what makes LSD a little bit different than psilocybin is it's a much longer ride.
Yeah.
And it was kind of fascinating to me how my complete sense of reality was gone. My sense of the world, everything around me was gone. And for a moment, I felt like I was in purgatory, or that limbo, or that space of just being raw emotions. And what occurred to me was I had this experience of just experiencing raw emotions. And at that particular time in my life, I was experiencing fear from a professional level at a very heightened level. So it kind of heightened this. And I journeyed with another person. It was just 2 of us. And she's like, you just got to ride this. Mm. And after going through that, I've had two more ego death experiences. The last one was a month ago. And what was fascinating to me was here, my sense of reality was gone, and I'm in a room of 12 people, all in Barker Lounger chairs. So, like, we're in a circle,
Mm-hmm.
is the way the host arranges it. I had awareness to be able to still get up, walk around bodies, and go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And I was like, as I reflect upon that now, I'm like, I still have, even though I completely, reality is shattered, I still had the awareness where other people, sometimes pee in their pants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what I most appreciate about the journey is that certainly the takeoff where the ego death happens is kind of like being shot out of a cannon or shot out of a rocket. When I got to that space of orbit, where consciousness and presence was so crystal clear, the medicine has this capacity to be like the limitless drug, where you can process, I mean, hundreds of thousands, a million bits of perceptions and realities in a very what's interesting is you feel like you're in the journey for days sometimes, and you find out it's only been minutes or hours. That state of presence can be addictive, and I recognize people can get there through meditation. And as one of my friends says, look, meditation is like using a walker to get to a state of presence, whereas plant medicine is like using a Ferrari. And because you're shot out of a cannon, it's that ego death that you just described. Can be a painful experience if you haven't built that muscle up.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I actually could really bounce back and like talk for hours about whether or not one is a walker and one's a cannon, because my experience as a lifelong meditator, my parents taught me to meditate before I even knew what a drug was, is that one gets you used to something and the other shows you it. So like I would say that while that
that's by the way, I totally got that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, only because I struggle with meditation, and I'm like many of my friends. So, but I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like when I learned meditation, the analogy they gave me that I loved was to make a candle, you take a wick and you dip it in scalding hot wax, and then you lift it in the air and let it dry, and then you keep dipping it. And that's what meditation is. It's so instead of a walker, I would use the candle analogy. Whereas when you take acid, you might dive into the bottom of that hot wax, but when you come out, you don't have as much on you, and you're not making a candle. So like there's no problem with using psychedelics or any of these, ayahuasca, any plant medicine, to have experiences, but then you should take that and build on it. And again, I am not dismissing what you said or attacking what you said. I'm simply giving my take on it because as someone who's in my 40s, I am concerned with younger people, not older people, thinking that like repeatedly taking ayahuasca or special ketamine or any of these things that are now becoming semi-legal and popular, is that's really not doing the work, but it is helpful. So it's like this weird line that I'm always kind of up against with people. And meditation is frustrating for everyone, and it's not frustrating for me in like year 30 something.
Yeah, and when you say doing the work, in which I'm fully in agreement with, you know, I'm a big proponent of individuals doing personal development, self-help, and spiritual work to improve their human behavior, to improve their way of being. And so there are some, like particularly might be therapy as an example, is a way to first gain a sense of self-awareness, particularly from an emotional maturity basis. So I wouldn't use psychedelics as that. For me, it's more the portal for me is connecting with that divinity within myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm such a big proponent of true doing the inner work, particularly in the area of self-awareness. So, and I would use everything but psychedelics for that because we have, unfortunately, sadly, a deeply wounded population of human beings on the planet who are suffering from childhood wounds or adult traumas that cause them to feel like I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not likable, hence where the self-love comes in, is that's my message, is to do the inner work. And for me, the psychedelics is to play in a different realm of consciousness for me.
Yeah, no,
But I'm a big proponent of doing self-help, personal development, spiritual work, and therapy.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue. As we wrap up the interview, I did want to give you a chance to talk about your book, which is, I love the title, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? So I'm sure you have a pitch, but maybe instead of giving us that, I would like you to kind of tailor it to the conversation we've had, because I'm sure it does. So.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. People say to me, like, what the heck is self-love anyway? And when I think of when I wrote the book, I thought about self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-reliance, self-discipline, all these self-words, and just encapsulated in the word love. It's really an opportunity. It's a very simplistic book. I mean, I look at Untethered Soul was kind of
I love that book.
Was kind of the way I wanted to write it. But I mean, to me, I could read one page of Untethered Soul and spend 6 hours contemplating one sentence, if you will. Yeah. I made mine very simplistic. It's just some simple rules to live by. And it was meant to be an introductory, because at the end, I shared my journey of all the different modalities, because I'll be candid with you. Losing my son wasn't the most painful thing in my life. I had went through a divorce, lost my high-end corporate job, and got wiped out in the market crash of 2008.
Oh, wow.
And that was the most painful experience in my life, because I lost my identity. It was through personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy that I built the emotional scaffolding over a 10-year period. So by the time he did pass away, I really like to repeat what I just said. Emotional scaffolding had been built, so it didn't take me down as it can so many people when they lose, particularly a child, but any loved one in their life. And so that's why I'm such a big proponent of this work, and particularly in human pair bonding, because you're going to deal with your when you're with somebody else in your life. You're going to deal, because they've got their emotional state to regulate, and you're a part of that versus being totally alone. So I'm a big proponent of doing the inner work, so you can not only navigate, your perception around life and death, but your experiences with other people. But most importantly, the best relationship you're ever going to have, I believe, and these are not my words, but the best relationship you're going to have is with yourself. So make it an awesome relationship. And maybe if you're lucky, you find a life mate, and maybe you can, navigate life without the fear that I talked about earlier in this broadcast.
That was such a great answer, and I really appreciate your take on that and on life and also on death. And I appreciate you opening up about Connor and also mentioning Gregory, so that is that his name? I think I said it right. Just so that people can understand where you're at in life, because I think, my son, my oldest son, my ex-wife abducted him, and so I don't see him anymore. And he'll return someday, but I have to deal with that perpetual grief, because it's not. I can't just get over him. I love him to death, and I want him to come back. And so it's interesting, because I think having 2 more kids also helped me see that, like, I can't just sit there and grieve all day about him. And I'm sure you're in the same position.
The one thing that I was able to navigate is the acceptance that he's not here. I can't imagine the pain you're experiencing, because it's not even remotely the same. It's actually, and I'm not grading this as
no, I understand.
Worse.
Yeah.
But I would think, emotionally speaking, that has to be incredibly challenging. So I just want to reach through the airwaves right now to you and give you a big, gigantic hug, because that must be just excruciating. And I don't mean to cause you to relive it, but I just want to acknowledge it.
No, it's actually the opposite. It's I took that pain and anguish and everything, and I turned it into a different career and a different identity, and that's why I'm here interviewing you. And it's also, and I really appreciate your emotional, heartfelt e-hug, as I call them, over the airwaves. Seriously, it is appreciated. But it's also interesting, because I've noticed no one would trade their thing with someone else. Like, so I would never trade the constant missing of my son who, will come back someday. You know what I mean by that.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But like, I wouldn't trade that for your experience with Connor, but you probably wouldn't trade your experience with mine.
I don't think I would. I'll be candid with you. I don't think I would, because and also, it's led me on so many different areas of my life. I can't even begin to tell you. So, I don't want to say I'm grateful for the experience, but I'm grateful that I've been able to embrace it and been able to make change and, help people in their lives because of the experience.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect note to end this podcast on, because I think that's all I want people to realize in life is that you are where you are, and no matter what got you there, if you're not going to make it positive, then what are you going to make it, and what's the point? So thank you.
Exactly.
Jonathon Aslay, you're an incredible guest. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate your take on literally everything, and there will be extensive notes for how to find you and also how to find your book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? I'm sure if you just enter it into Google's your friend, it'll send you right to Amazon. But thank you again for coming on the show, and to everyone who's listening at home, once again, please head over to mikeyop.com. That's MIKEYOPD.com, and sign up for the free once-a-week essay that I write. You will be helping me and this podcast tremendously. Once again, my name is Mike Oppenheim. You have been listening to Coffin Talk, and we will see you soon.